hand reached across a bakery counter and grabbed hard at the edge of a display case. Not to buy anything, just to hold on. The knuckles went white. The woman on the other side was trembling. Her voice came out barely above a whisper. She asked if there was any cake left over. Any expired cake. Anything they were going to throw away. For her daughter. She said that last part fast, like she was ashamed of it. The man behind the counter looked at her. Looked past her. Looked back down at the counter. He didn't answer. He just started wiping the glass. There was a man 2 steps away who had heard every single word. He had been standing there the whole time, completely still. His name was Bruce Lee. What he did next, nobody in that bakery was ready for. Stay with me on this one. Hong Kong, 1972. The city was alive in ways that are hard to explain if you weren't there. Movies were booming. Money was moving fast through the streets. New restaurants. New buildings going up. And in working neighborhoods like Kowloon, a bakery called Golden Gate had just opened, clean glass cases, Western-style cakes with cream and sugar flowers on top, the kind of place that made people stop and press their noses to the window on the way to work. The owner was a man named Mr. Kwong. He had saved for 12 years to open that shop. And he ran it like a man who knew the value of every single thing inside it. Not unkind exactly, but tight. The kind of man who counted the coins before he put them in the register and counted them again after. He had a reputation in the neighborhood for quality. He also had a reputation for not giving anything away. Not samples. Not day-olds. Not anything. Now here's the thing about that neighborhood. It was mixed. Working families, factory workers, street vendors, and then, increasingly, people who were doing well. New money showing up next to old struggle. Golden Gate sat right at that line. Fancy enough to attract the people with new money in their pockets. Close enough to the old streets that everyone else could walk by and look through the glass. A woman named Wei Lan had walked by that bakery every morning for 3 weeks. Every morning she slowed at the window. Every morning she looked at the same cake. Small and round, covered in white cream, with pink sugar roses arranged across the top. And every morning she walked on. Because the price on that cake was more than she made in 2 days at the factory. Wei Lan worked in a garment factory on the edge of the district. Long hours, 6 days a week. She had a daughter named May, 6 years old, thin, with large dark eyes and a gap where her 2 front teeth had been before a fall 2 months earlier. Wei Lan still hadn't had the money to take her to a proper dentist. But May never complained about that. She never complained about anything. She just smiled her gapped smile and asked her mother, every now and then, whether they would have a cake on her birthday. May's birthday was that day. Wei Lan had made rice porridge for breakfast. She had given May an extra spoonful of sugar in it, which was a treat in their house. She had also folded a paper crane from a sheet of newspaper and left it beside May's bowl. May had held it with both hands, carefully, like it was made of something precious. But all morning, even while she was getting dressed for school and even while she was putting on her shoes, she had asked the same question. Just the one question. Mama, will we have cake today? Wei Lan had told her yes. She had no idea how she was going to make that happen. But she had said yes. Because that is what mothers do. And now she was standing in front of the Golden Gate Bakery before the morning rush, gathering herself, preparing to ask the one question she had spent the whole week building up the courage to ask. The man behind the counter that morning was not Mr. Kwong. It was his assistant, a young man named Bao, 19 years old, solid build, with a flat expression that stayed the same regardless of what was happening in front of him. When Wei Lan stepped to the counter, Bao had looked at her the way he looked at everyone, with his eyes slightly down, focused on whatever they were pointing at in the display case, not on the person standing there. She had pointed at nothing. She had just asked, was there anything left over from yesterday? Anything they were planning to throw away? Anything that had passed its date and couldn't be sold? For her daughter. Bao looked at her for one moment. Then he looked away. He picked up his cloth and started wiping the display case. Slow, steady strokes. The 2 other customers in the shop pretended they had not heard. And there was one more person, standing near the end of the display case a little to the side. He had come in alone, no one with him, wearing dark trousers and a plain collared shirt. He had been looking at the pastries, the egg tarts, the cream rolls, the rows of small cakes, with the patient stillness of someone waiting their turn. Not browsing, just waiting, quiet. He had heard every single word she said. Bruce Lee was 31 years old that year. He had made 2 films that had pulled in crowds nobody had seen before in Hong Kong cinema. He was not yet the legend, that word comes after a man is gone. But he was somebody. Anybody in that neighborhood could tell you that. He walked into a room and people noticed. He was used to being watched. What he was not used to was what he was watching right now. A woman gripping a glass counter to hold herself steady because she couldn't buy a birthday cake for her daughter. And an assistant with a cleaning cloth pretending she wasn't there. Bruce Lee stayed completely still. He stayed quiet. And he watched what happened next. Bao kept wiping. Long, slow strokes. He had a trick. Staying busy enough that whatever conversation someone wanted to have simply couldn't get started. Polishing glass. Adjusting trays. Straightening a stack of boxes. It worked on most people. Wei Lan was not most people. She asked again. Quieter, if anything. But she did not move away from the counter. Her hands stayed on the edge of the case. She said she understood how a bakery worked. She was not asking for anything fresh. She said she would take anything that was going to be discarded anyway. Anything that was past its date. She would take it with no complaint and no expectation. Just, was there anything like that at all? Bao put down his cloth. He told her this was not how the shop worked. He said nothing was thrown away. Day-olds went back to the supplier or were sold at a small discount, all accounted for. He said he could not help her and that other customers were waiting. She said she understood. She said she was sorry to take his time. And then she asked one more time. Just the question in its plainest form. Piece of something. Anything. For her daughter's birthday. That was when Mr. Kwong came out from the back. He had been in his office doing the morning accounts. He had heard the conversation through the open door. He was a compact man, slightly round through the middle, with reading glasses pushed up on his head that he never seemed to actually use for reading. He came out with his hands drying on a small towel, the way he always did when something needed to be handled. He looked at Wei Lan. He assessed the situation in about 3 seconds. Then he spoke, not cruelly, but with the firm efficiency of a man who has a policy and intends to keep it. He told her this was a business, that he had a family to feed himself, that if he started giving things away to every person who asked, he would have nothing left inside a week. He said she was welcome to come back and make a purchase when she was ready. He said it in the tone of a man who has rehearsed exactly this speech, like he had decided on it long before she ever walked through his door, and nothing she could say was going to change it. Wei Lan stood there for a moment. Her face didn't fall apart. She was not going to cry in front of these people. But something in her shoulders dropped. Just a small amount. The fraction of drop that means a person has let go of something they had been holding onto for a long time. She thanked him. She said she was sorry to have troubled him. She picked up the cloth shopping bag she had set on the counter, nearly empty, and she turned toward the door. One of the other customers stepped aside to let her through. Nobody said a word. The bell above the door rang as she pushed it open and walked out into the morning. Mr. Kwong went back behind the counter. He said something low to Bao, probably about getting on with it. Bao nodded and went back to the display case. The 2 other customers moved forward. The shop went back to its rhythm. Morning routine. Business as usual. Now, here is the part. Here is where it turns. Bruce Lee had not moved. He was still standing at the end of the display case, looking at the door. Then he looked at the display case. He looked at the small cakes in the back row. He looked at the medium ones in the center. And then he looked at the one in the corner, the largest cake on display that morning. White cream, pink sugar roses arranged across the top. A ribbon of yellow fondant around the base. He looked at that cake for a long moment. Then he put his hands in his pockets, straightened up, and he stood there, completely still, with his eyes on the door where Wei Lan had just walked out. The 2 customers at the counter collected their orders and left. The shop went quiet. Bao went to the back. Mr. Kwong was alone at the register, writing in his ledger. He had not looked up once. Bruce Lee walked to the door and walked out. The bell rang again. Now, in any other story, that is the ending. A famous man saw something sad and walked on. The way almost everyone does. Almost every time. The morning continues. The shop returns to normal. Nothing changes. But here is what Mr. Kwong did not know. Bruce Lee had not turned left toward the main street. He had turned right, which was the direction Wei Lan had gone. She had not gone far. Wei Lan was standing at the corner of the block, 30 meters from the bakery, her back against the wall, her bag in both hands, looking at the ground. Not crying. Just standing there in the particular way a person stands when they are deciding whether to keep going or turn around and try one more time. Caught between what they know is impossible and what they cannot let themselves walk away from. She did not hear him approach. She looked up and there he was, standing about 2 feet away, looking at her directly. She recognized him immediately. Everyone in that neighborhood did. For a second she thought she had made a mistake. That a man like this could not possibly be standing here in front of her, looking at her like this. He said good morning. She said good morning back. He asked her, quietly, directly, no build-up, what her daughter's name was. Wei Lan told him, May. He asked how old she was turning today. She told him, 6. He nodded once. And then he said, come back inside with me. She started to protest. She said she didn't want any more trouble. She said she was fine, thank you, she would figure something out. He shook his head. Just slightly. No trouble. Just come back inside. Now here is the thing. A man like Bruce Lee in Hong Kong in 1972 did not go unnoticed. The 2 women running a vegetable stall across the street had already recognized him. A boy on a bicycle had slowed to a stop. A man coming out of the hardware shop next door had stopped walking entirely. None of them said anything. They just watched. Wei Lan followed him back through the door of Golden Gate Bakery. The bell rang. Mr. Kwong looked up from his ledger. And when he saw who had just walked in, he put his pen down. Bruce Lee walked directly to the display case. He pointed at the large cake in the corner. The one with the white cream and the pink sugar roses and the yellow fondant ribbon around the base. He said he wanted that one. Mr. Kwong said of course immediately. His whole manner different now, attentive, eager, and started reaching for a box. Then Bruce Lee said one more thing. He said he wanted it written on. He said he wanted it to say Happy Birthday, May across the top. Mr. Kwong said of course, not a problem, he would do it himself. He told Bao to bring the piping bag. Wei Lan had not said a word since they walked in. She was standing just inside the doorway holding her cloth bag, watching. Her face had gone very still. The kind of still that means someone is working hard to hold something together. Mr. Kwong wrote the name himself. May. In red icing. Clean, careful strokes. He set the cake in a white box, tied it with a ribbon. He held it across the counter and stated the price. Bruce Lee paid without looking at the number. He picked up the box. He turned around and walked to Wei Lan. He held it out to her. She did not take it right away. She looked at him, then at the box, then back at him. And then she said, and this is the part that the people who were there still talk about decades later. She said she could not accept it. She could not let him do that. It was too much. She was sorry. She could not. He said, it's not for you. It's for May. She took the box. If you're with me on this story, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. I don't want you to miss what comes next. She was holding the box with both hands, tightly, and the tears she had held back inside this bakery. Twice now. She was not holding back anymore. They came quietly, no sound, just down her face, steady, while she stood in the middle of a bakery holding a birthday cake for her 6-year-old daughter. Bruce Lee turned and looked at Mr. Kwong. He spoke in a voice that was not raised, not sharp, just clear and level. He said he hoped Mr. Kwong would think about this moment, about what it had actually cost him to say no, about what it might have cost him, barely anything at all, to have simply said yes. Mr. Kwong said nothing. He stood behind his counter with both hands flat on the glass. Then Bruce Lee did something no one in that bakery had expected. He reached into his pocket. He took out his wallet and removed a significant amount of money, more than the cake had cost, and he set it on the counter. He said it was for the next person who came in and needed something they couldn't quite afford. Mr. Kwong looked at the money. He looked at Bruce Lee. He looked at Wei Lan, still holding the box, still with tears on her face. He was a man caught between his pride and something he had not felt in a while. Not sharp shame, the slow kind, the kind that settles into a person quietly and stays. He said, "I'll remember." Bruce Lee nodded. And that was all. They walked out together. The boy on the bicycle was still at the curb. The women from the vegetable stall had stepped out from behind their table. 2 or 3 more people had stopped on the pavement. Not a crowd. Just a cluster, the way clusters form on a Hong Kong morning street when something is happening that people aren't quite sure they're allowed to watch. Nobody said anything as Bruce Lee and Wei Lan came through the door. He walked with her to the corner where she had been standing with her back to the wall, deciding whether to give up. He stopped there. He looked at her, and then he told her something. The people close enough to hear it said he told her she had done nothing wrong. That asking for something for her child was not something to be ashamed of. That she should never feel ashamed of that. He said it simply, without drama. The way you say something you believe all the way through. Wei Lan was holding the cake box against her chest. She was not crying anymore. She looked at him and she said, "This is verbatim. This is what she told people for the rest of her life." She said, "My daughter thinks the world is fair. I was starting to think she was wrong." Bruce Lee looked at her for a moment. Then he said, "Today it is." He reached into his pocket one more time. He took out more money, enough for a week of groceries, maybe more, and he pressed it into her hand. He closed her fingers around it. He told her to make sure May got to a proper dentist as well. That was what finally broke her open. Not the cake. The dentist. He had heard everything. Every detail she had let slip in that bakery. He had held all of it. She pressed her free hand over her mouth and looked away. When she looked back, she could only get out 2 words. "Thank you." He nodded. And then he turned and walked up the street. No announcement. No backward glance. He just walked. The boy on the bicycle watched him go for half a block. The women from the vegetable stall watched until he turned the corner. And then the morning returned to itself. Buses. Voices. The smell of the bakery drifting through the open door. Wei Lan stood there for a moment longer. Then she straightened, put the money carefully into her bag, tucked the cake box under her arm, and she walked toward May's school. May was in the middle of a lesson when the teacher called her to the door. Wei Lan was standing in the corridor with the box. May looked at the box. She looked at her mother. She looked at the box again. Wei Lan lifted the lid. White cream, pink sugar roses, and written across the top in red, "Happy birthday, May." May was 6 years old. She had not had a birthday cake since she was 3. She stood in the corridor doorway with her mouth open. Then she looked up at her mother. And then she cried, the way a 6-year-old cries when something is too big. Loudly, completely, holding nothing back. The teacher came to the door. She looked at the cake. She looked at the little girl. She looked at Wei Lan, who was by this point not holding anything together either. The teacher took the box from Wei Lan's hands, very gently, and said, "Shall we share this with the class?" May looked at her mother. Wei Lan looked at the cake, at the name written on it in careful red letters. Then she said, "Yes, of course, yes." They cut it after school. Every child in May's class had a piece. The teachers had pieces. May had 2 because it was her birthday and nobody in that school was going to argue the point. She didn't know yet where it had come from. She didn't know any of it yet. She just knew there was cake. She just knew her mother had kept her promise. Here is what happened after. Mr. Kwong went back to his ledger that morning. He sat down. He picked up his pen. He sat there for almost 20 minutes without writing a single number. Bao, who had seen the whole thing, said later that he had never seen the man sit that still in the years he had worked for him. Just the pen in his hand. The open book in front of him. Not moving. What Mr. Kwong did the next day was not dramatic. He made no announcement. He put no sign in the window. He did not call the staff together and make a speech. He simply told Bao, quietly, the way he told Bao everything, that at the end of each day whatever remained in the display case that had not sold would no longer be thrown away or sent back. It would be set aside. And if someone came in who needed it, it was theirs. He called it a new policy. Bao called it something different many years later. He called it Mr. Kwong remembering who he had been before he became so afraid of losing what he had. The money Bruce Lee had left on the counter, the extra amount, the money set aside for whoever came next. Mr. Kwong kept it in a small envelope in the register drawer. He used it 4 times in the first month. A woman buying bread who came up short. 2 schoolboys who counted out their coins twice and still didn't have enough. An old man who stood at the counter and kept apologizing while he searched his pockets for more. Each time, Kwong reached into the envelope. Each time, he said nothing about where the money came from. Now, some people hear this story and they stop at the cake. The cake is the easy part. The part that lands cleanly and makes you feel something right away. But the part that lasted, the part that kept going long after that morning, was what Bruce Lee said to Kwong at the counter. That one quiet sentence. No anger in it. No performance. Just a question calmly delivered. Think about what it cost you. Think about what it might have cost you to say yes. That kind of question does not leave a decent person. It stays. It finds a place and it lives there. And whatever else was true about Mr. Kwong, that he was careful, that he was proud, that he had spent 12 years being afraid of losing what he had built, he was not a bad man. He had just stopped noticing certain things. And Bruce Lee had put them back in front of him, without making him feel attacked, without taking anything from him publicly. Shame fades. Quiet, honest reminder stays. As for Wei Lan, she kept working at the factory. She got May to the dentist 3 weeks after her birthday. The new teeth came in clean, the dentist said, nothing to worry about. She moved to a slightly larger apartment the following year. May went to school, then to university. Then she became a teacher herself. She taught primary school children for more than 30 years. And she kept the box. Wei Lan had not thrown it away. After the last crumbs were gone, she had folded it flat, carefully, and tied the ribbon back around it. She had put it in a drawer. It was just white cardboard, just a ribbon, but it stayed in that drawer for the rest of her life. Her daughter found it after she passed. Flat, a little faded, the ribbon still tied. On the inside of the lid, the red icing letters that had ghosted into the cardboard over the decades. You could just make out the words, "Happy birthday, May." May framed it. It is on a wall in her home right now. As for Bruce Lee himself, he did not talk about that morning. Not in any interview. Not in any conversation that anyone has found a record of. He simply walked up the street and turned the corner and went about his day. He was 31 years old when this happened. He had less than a year left to live. In the months that followed, he would complete Enter the Dragon. He would become, fully and finally, the kind of name that does not go away. His philosophy, his films, his face, all of it would travel and keep traveling long after he was gone. But the people who were there that morning, Bao behind the counter, the women from the vegetable stall, the boy on the bicycle, what they remembered was not any of that. They remembered a man who heard something most people would have let pass, who stopped when stopping was inconvenient, who did the simple thing without performance, without needing anyone to see him do it, and then walked away. That is the thing about real strength. Not the kind that wins fights, the kind that notices what other people walk past, the kind that stops when it would be easier not to, the kind that acts without needing a reason or an audience. The kind that says one quiet sentence to a man behind a counter, "Think about what it cost you," and then puts the question down and walks away because the question is enough. There was a little girl with a gap in her teeth who ate birthday cake that day, who shared it with her whole class, who did not know yet what it had taken to get there, but who would learn eventually, who would sit still as a grown woman and listen to every word of it. That is the whole story, and sometimes that is enough.